You guys still there?
We're here. Good evening. Today is March 29, 2021, and this is the 45th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. The 29th of March is the National Vietnam Veterans Day. On March 29th, 2012, President Obama signed the proclamation which called upon all Americans to do whatever they can in order to run the appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities to commemorate the 50th year anniversary of the Vietnam War. My guest today is the VFW Post Commander, Kevin Morrison of the Niles Memorial Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 3579, which I am a member of. The post is located in Niles, Illinois. Kevin served in the United States Army from 1987 to 1983 in the 12th Special Forces Group. And from 2002 to 2020, he transitioned to serving in the United States Naval Reserve. Kevin holds a BA in history from Thomas Edison University. The Niles Memorial VFW Post 3579 has 596 members and is the 298 of these VFWs in the country. 6,000 of them are located worldwide. The VFW has a membership of 2.6 million combat veterans and also posts located in all the 50 states, to include in Germany, United Kingdom, Thailand, Okinawa, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Guam, the Marshall Islands, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and one of the oldest one that is located in Paris, France. Kevin, it's good to have you here, buddy. I know it's a little bit loud in your location today. The boys are enjoying themselves. Today is their day. I wanted to bring you in on this wonderful day for recognition of the Vietnam veterans and give an opportunity to talk to you about the issues that the Vietnam vets, but all veterans are facing, and also what we may be looking at going forward as far as transitions are taking place in today's Army under different leadership. Kevin, it's good to have you here, buddy.
Thank you, Sargis. Thank you for welcoming on your show.
Kevin, I want to get right into it. Tell us about the Vietnam War. Give us a breakdown on the history of the Vietnam War, and then how did we get here to the recognition day, which is on the 29th of March.
Well, the United States involvement in the Vietnam War began in May 1961. And it began with 400 military advisors, otherwise known as Special Forces, Green Berets. They were sent to Vietnam with accompanying helicopters and aircraft. And the U.S., they initially started out as an advisory capacity, but things steadily increased. When we had the Gulf of Tonkin incident, it actually became a full-scale war, and as we both know, there were surrogates in it. The Chinese were testing out their newest and greatest anti-aircraft guns, and the Russians were also testing out their stuff. But it extended until the war, actually, U.S. military direct participation ended on January 27th, 1973, and that was with the signing of the Paris Peace Accords. That basically ended direct line U.S. military intervention. But Saigon fell in April of 1975, and the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps did a massive airlift campaign to remove American citizens and South Vietnamese allies from Saigon. And in total, the Vietnam War resulted in the deaths of 58,200 U.S. service members and 2,546 unaccounted for MIA and POWs.
No, I know that a lot of people have really forgotten about the Vietnam War. It's unfortunate, but it was very key to America's transitioning as far as how it looks at foreign policy requirements. And you mentioned the peace accords, the Paris Peace Accords. Actually, everybody had come to the table and signed the peace accords, to include the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese government, who had recognized that the U.S. had won the war, to be honest. And their signing of the Vietnam Peace Accord was victory for us. Unfortunately, as you know, it was the Congress that did not support the agreement that was in the peace accord signed, which was in order to be able to get basically one-for-one weapon requirements. So if it's one bullet that was expended by the South Vietnamese, the U.S. government would provide them with a bullet. Eventually, the Congress, in this case, after, of course, the resignation of the president at that time, Nixon, when they decided not to go ahead and fund it anymore, is when the North Vietnamese used that as an opportunity to start moving into South Vietnam. But actually, if people look into the history of it, the Vietnam War was won when the Paris Accords were signed, because the North Vietnamese realized they couldn't win, and also even the Viet Cong had signed the accord. But I wanted to kind of take a look at some of the slides we put together, Kevin. I know that today we were both part of ceremonies at different locations. I was at the Vietnam War Memorial that initially James Byrne had put together. But I'll let you go ahead and discuss about what the Chicago Memorial was all about, and then how we got to the signing of the proclamation by President Obama.
Well, the Vietnam veterans, they were pretty much very unjustly treated when they returned home from combat. They were often assaulted and spit upon by a very contemptuous American youth that were very anti-war and sympathetic to our communist adversaries. This was all being promoted with the drug scene and the free love scene. It all went hand in hand. And the Vietnam veterans came home. They had an incredibly high addiction rate, high divorce rate, homelessness, and suicide rate. A lot of the veterans chose to ignore their service. They didn't want to talk about it because it was too painful. And I have a lot of personal interaction with Vietnam veterans. I love that group of veterans. I think they're my favorite group. I mean, I was trained by them in the Army, and when I came on the job, they trained me. But in 1986, Mayor Jane Byrne officially welcomed Vietnam veterans home. In Chicago, she sponsored the nation's largest Welcome Home Vietnam Veterans Parade. And that parade really opened the doors to a lot of these guys to talk, to socialize, and they created the Vietnam Veterans of America. And there are chapters all throughout the United States, very tight-knit group of people, but the healing process began. And it took almost 20 years for that to occur, and then President Obama, he did make that proclamation on March 29th, 2012. The Vietnam Veterans Day would be on March 29th every year. And that proclamation did call for all Americans to observe this day with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities that commemorate the 50th anniversary. I think, growing up with a lot of Vietnam veterans, kids I went to school with and whatnot, and seeing what I saw after that parade and after the creation of the VVA, I think a lot of things started to change. And
No, I know a lot of. Look, Vietnam veterans are much closer to each other, as you know that, Kevin, and than the guys are new generation with OIF and OEF. Now, some may say no, but when you see them, when you see how close knit of a group they are is just a different type of a camaraderie that they feel. And I know that welcome home is their call. And I got to tell you, the average life expectancy was not that long. And I know today you could still see the emotions are raw with how many people were lost in Vietnam, but we're still losing people today. I know we had one of the pictures on the slide, if you could bring back up again, is one of our own, actually, within the VFW, that is there standing behind them are those Agent Orange barrels, which were used in the war, and the cancers that it has caused and the issues that it has caused specifically for us is horrendous. If you could talk a little bit about where we are with the Agent Orange issues and topics that we've been dealing with in Congress.
Well, Agent Orange was a chemical defoliant known as dioxin, and there were other colors of Agent Orange. It wasn't just orange. There was purple and blue. But they used 20 million plus gallons of it to defoliate Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, parts of Thailand, and the Korean DMZ. So what we subsequently found out was that list of 14 health conditions associated with exposure to Agent Orange, everything from multiple different cancers to a version of Parkinson's disease, and sadly, all of these things are pretty accurate. I know some of the Vietnam vets that have been afflicted by these things. One in particular, my cousin, he's pretty much, he was a Marine in Vietnam, and he's kind of been hit very hard with the cancer. And the sad part was the government didn't initially acknowledge the use and the detriment that it created, and not only that, but to the ecology of those countries and to the populace over there. And this extended all the way out to the Blue Water Navy. Last year, they did finally approve the Blue Water Navy bill, which goes out to the 12-mile limit, coastal limits of Vietnam. So they were flying these aircraft off and loading the defoliants, on naval ships and flying into Vietnam and spraying it. And these guys, were inhaling it and getting it on themselves, and subsequent birth defects and all kinds of cancers and whatnot have occurred.
No, I know. I have a cousin of mine who served also in Vietnam. He was with the Navy, and he did suffer from prostate cancer because of it. Now, the thing was that there was no coverage for veterans who are suffering these issues, no disability being given to them, and because they were not considered being on mainland Vietnam. And we found out that when we had our allies, the Australians were serving with us, they were having a lot of their people who were going back from Vietnam dying and basically having a lot of medical issues. When they started looking at what was the problem, they tied it to the filtration system that was being used on American ships. And the American ships that were using the filtration system were not created to filter out these type of chemicals. And because of that, a lot of people, as you know, once it gets into the foliage, it actually can get into the water, and was getting into the drinking waters that were being used, that were not purifying these chemicals on the Navy ships and on the boats that were being used to run those tributaries, which caused the cancer. So we've had decades of Vietnam veterans who never were able to support them until last year, like you said, when finally President Trump, in this case, went ahead and signed the Blue Water Act, which covered them. And unfortunately, we've lost a lot of veterans since then, and their families have not gotten the disability that they deserve. And as you know, a lot of these illnesses do carry from the mother's placenta from generation to generation, which was a list of those 14 you had put up. I do know that even for me, where I served, my first duty station was Korea. Even for us, when we come back, we have to get on the registry for Agent Orange because it was used in Korea also. And I think that's
Yep.
one of the things a lot of our Vietnam vets just do not put their names on these registries. I know that we have other issues too, with especially with the other vaccines that were given to U.S. servicemen. I know we had the anthrax filing there. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the anthrax was a mandatory shot during the Persian Gulf War. Then they brought it back again, and now the Army has gotten away from it again. I know the Navy, it was optional. You had a choice, informed consent, whether or not you took it. I chose not to take anthrax, and my naval physician actually said that was probably unofficially a wise choice. But there was an extremely high percentage of reactions with the anthrax vaccine. And there's no conclusive evidence that the experimental vaccine did, in fact, cause the Gulf War sickness. It's kind of still up in the air. It could be a result of burn pits or oil inhalation, petroleum inhalation, when the oil rigs were set on fire, along with the depleted uranium that was also abundantly used in the first Gulf War. But there was a lot of issues, and they have basically rescinded forcing anthrax on people, which I think it's a good thing. I mean, I get it. We have to be prepared for a chemical, biological, and radiological position in today's world, but we really need to know that, what we're doing to our service people is not going to, in fact, harm them or ruin lives.
No, look, I agree. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't have your physician. For me, it was mandatory. I had to get the shot and the boosters that followed up. So, it's, with all the chemicals you put in your body, you never know. And you were talking about the oil fields. I know the first Gulf War, my friends came back and told us about the stories of how bad the oil field burns were. I remember just my second tour that was in Iraq. You have continuous burning of oil because even at that time, the Iraqi government hadn't figured out how to really take care of their oil fields. So we were staying in, when we went in to take over from the British and Basra, we were staying in a location where we had constant burning of oil right out of an oil field refinery right next to you. So these conditions do cause problems for our folks. Depleted uranium was a big piece too, that we have those slides up right now. And I know that we had to deal with it specifically also in Kuwait when I was a director for Host Nation Affairs. I know that the Kuwaiti government kept on trying to get the U.S. government to come in and clean up the depleted uranium that was used on some of the ranges there. And we did use that in Gulf War. However, U.S. did not want to do that because of political reasons, because if they did that and they would have to pay for it, then they would have to pay for the cleanup of all the ranges and areas that depleted uranium was used in any of the countries that we fought wars in. If you could talk a little bit about the depleted uranium, where we are right now, as far as what the government is looking at and what the VFW is recommending.
Well, in the most recent piece that I read, that they're trying to deny that depleted uranium actually caused health maladies. But depleted uranium, it was used to penetrate tank armor, and it's a very high density, so it penetrates armored vehicles extremely well. And it's a byproduct of uranium enrichment, where the natural uranium from the Earth's crust is enriched with higher energy isotopes to produce suitable for use in nuclear reactors. So they say that it's about 40% radioactive, so those isotopes, and it becomes a very fine powder or that you inhale while breathing or eating or whatnot. Once it gets ingested into your system, down the road you can have lung ailments or you can have GI problems, and there's seemingly a lot of issues showing up right now, and just handling former armored vehicles that have been blown up or that were burned has also given these guys pretty high exposure to this stuff. The small particles of depleted uranium, when they're breathed in or swallowed, they're basically in you forever. I mean, you're inhaling a radioactive substance that's 40% radioactive, and it's obviously not a good thing. And when these munitions hit their targets, they shatter and they become airborne, particulate, and then it blends in with the sand in the desert or whatnot, and you inhale it, or you're eating and it gets on your food or whatnot, and now you've got a high likelihood of kidney problems.
Well, I mean, it's amazing the type of stuff that you have to handle when you're in the service. I know some of our folks that may not have served in the military, when they see some of the stuff that we had to deal with, like I said, I had to get on the registry for Agent Orange, even though I was decades removed from when it was used. At the same time, the anthrax, we had to get the mandatory shot for us. Same time, you talked about depleted uranium. We did use that while I was in the service, and we had to deal with it constantly. I do know that you mentioned the burn pits, and you had a picture of it. We had to burn our stuff when I was in Iraq, and I know that constantly was on somewhere that you probably didn't want to be in. A lot of stuff that was dumped in there in those burn pits besides just paper. Sometimes you had plastics and other things that were burned too that caused environmental health issues. I do know that there's a argument that's taking place right now currently with the COVID vaccine. You mentioned we have to be prepared for a pandemic. We know that there's more likely stories coming out, even with the government officials and CDC folks saying it's likely that the virus that we suffered did come out of a lab out of Wuhan. But my question is on the COVID shot. I know that the government is trying to say that we are giving an option to servicemen, but I don't think that option is available. If you could talk a little bit more about it. What is the issue with COVID shot? Is it optional for the servicemen, or do they have to get it?
Well, as you know, being a former commander, you're given rigid guidelines to get 100% compliance on whatever a task is. It comes from upstairs, from the brigade down to you or the division, and you implement what you're told, whether it be 100% compliance on COVID shots or vaccines. So you have what's called informed consent. The service member theoretically has the capability of not taking the COVID vaccine, but now there's been multiple instances of service members that have had their leave restricted, liberty restricted, or they're singled out by the group for not voluntarily submitting to the vaccination. For example, your unit, your brigade or your battalion, or even for that matter, a platoon element, if one individual opts not to get the COVID vaccine, what they do is they use the groupthink, and everyone has to wear a mask, and then they blame it on you, individual that chose to opt against getting vaccinated. So there's a high degree of peer pressure, and it's bordering right now upon outright intimidation. When there's been instances in the Navy where service members have actually received counseling, which is theoretically, it's not a good thing when it shows up in your service jacket. And it's basically nullifying service members' informed consent. And the problem is with, older service members, they know the regs and they know what their rights are. But these kids, they just follow along like sheep. And, I'm not saying that the COVID vaccine is also an experimental vaccine. So that's a whole nother interesting scenario that's going to unfold in the next year or two, and we'll see how that materializes.
Kevin, when it comes to the VFW, what is the VFW role when it comes to all these type of issues and topics that we just talked about and kind of covered? I know a lot of it falls under the medical piece, but we wanted to make sure at least we highlighted some of the problems that veterans have to deal with, especially Vietnam veterans. And I know these are the pictures from today's ceremony where we're at the wall that we talked about, that James Byrne was the main push for it, and was the first time that actually there was a memorial in the United States that was established for Vietnam vets. My question is, what is the role of the VFW when it comes to these type of programs? With 2.6 million veterans, how much of a sway do you really have in DC, or do you have any?
The VFW has a massive sway on Capitol Hill. They have lobbyists and 2.6 million members. That loosely translates into 2+ million voters. And they also work, the VFW is a veteran service organization, and they work in tandem with other organizations like the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans, the Vietnam Veterans of America, and AMVETS. And what they do is they represent the interests of veterans, and whether it be legislation that will enhance benefits, but it's also very important to retain current benefits, because there has been moves in the past to reduce veteran benefits. It's not a very popular thing right now, after 19 years plus of war, but the VFW, as you stated, there's 6,000 posts across the world. There's 298 in Illinois alone, and it's a home away from home. It's a place where a veteran can seek socialization. You also have the ability to get benefit assistance with the post 9/11 GI Bill, or the GI Bill, VA disability claims, job placement, employment seminars and career fairs, suicide awareness, PTSD screenings and referrals, and that's just what we do. Some of the more key functions that we do for veterans. Right now, we're also gearing up to the younger vets to become more active with more outdoor events and sporting type events, but we're also civically engaged. The VFW does everything from running blood drives. Like this year, I think we had 38 pints of blood that we generated on our blood drive, and that was at a time that there was a critical blood shortage during the height of COVID. So just that alone really benefits the hospital system. And we also sponsor Little League teams, and we engage with the community on everything from homelessness to food banks. We raised close to 400 pounds of food in our food drive in November, and we also, all the money that we raise, just so everybody knows, when we do Poppy Days, all that money is given away to charity. So when you buy your Poppy and you throw your $5 in, all that money is annually allocated to various either veterans causes or civic causes in the community.
Kevin, you did mention the issues of veterans and what the VFW does, and you did mention as far as the some of the medical issues that our veterans are dealing with. I guess my question would be in this case that the VFW has been one of the leading organizations when it comes to looking at what are the requirements to be able to support veterans when it comes to U.S. government, especially to increase the integrity of the, I would say, the medical support in this case for those veterans, especially our Vietnam veterans are out there tonight, that some of them are really dealing with some severe issues, as you and me know, in our own family. So with that said, given the fact that I have served and sacrificed for our nation over the years, some of the veterans, if not many of them, had to pay out of pocket for some of the expenses for those medical care specifically that the government would not cover. And in some cases, they wouldn't cover it because the paperwork was not, it was easier to reject the paperwork than to go ahead and go through and support the process to be able to get the veteran what he needed. What is the current, I guess I would ask, status of the VFW initiatives to ensure that all the veteran services that you just mentioned and what they're able to provide related medical issues are covered specifically?
Well, the motto of the VFW is nobody does more for veterans. So they take extreme pride in addressing veterans' concerns and veteran issues. So whether it be lobbying on Capitol Hill, everything from postcard campaigns to emails to put our name out there in back legislation. And like I said, we also work in conjunction with these other veteran service organizations to ensure that these things get addressed. The VFW has a monthly newsletter or a magazine, and they address all the current up-to-date veterans issues that are hot topics, hot button topics, and what they're doing to improve upon the situation. Now, with that said, we have a big disconnect with the younger generation. Like you had mentioned earlier, the Vietnam veterans are solid. They're my favorite group of vets. They're very, very close. They were very traumatized and ignored for 20 plus years, but they were a very resilient group and very tight-knit group. But we're not seeing that. You acknowledged that earlier with the Desert Storm or the OEF or OIF veterans. A lot of these kids are slipping through the cracks. And what they don't realize is that these veteran service organizations, it's a nominal amount of money to join one, but you have access to a veteran service officer to help you with your claims or give you information. You also have a big support network that transcends, it's worldwide. There's VFWs in Germany, Canada, Puerto Rico, England, France. I think one of the oldest posts is in Paris. They're all over the world. So you have a home away from home when you're traveling. But these younger guys don't realize the necessity of this. I think some of these kids come home and I'm seeing a drop off. Like some of these guys have PTSD issues. Some are too proud to admit it. And I've seen it myself. I mean, I have one post member, good guy, speaking to him one night. I ran into him at the bar. We went outside, we're talking, and he just completely broke down. I said, you got some serious PTSD issues. And, I said, you need to come to the post and talk to some guys and we'll get you plugged in, and it took about 8 months to get him to reach out and get some help. But then they wonder, one of the horrors that's transpiring right now is the 22 a day. You're losing 22 veterans per day to suicide, and suicide awareness is huge with us and with the military now. It's the active duty military too, and it's rampant in the military. I've never seen anything like it. I look at the military times, and there's quite a bit of it, and there's there's an awful lot of it going on with veterans too, from different eras and different conflicts, but particularly these last OEF and OAF.
No, look, war is war. It doesn't matter what generation you faced it, and it does have effects on you. But I think one of the things I've noticed somewhat is with some of the younger guys coming out, they don't really know where the Army would pay and would not pay as far as their requirements for their disability is concerned. Look, I'll give you a perfect example. I guess I would ask this question of the VFW stand. I know that the new Biden administration recently has indicated that that veterans that were desiring to voluntarily even do a sex change operation should receive up to $200,000 coverage by the U.S. government, whether they are in now or are going or were in the past. Given that severe service-related medical treatment is currently either underfunded or even not even covered as far as under service disability requirements, what is the VFW's position when it comes to asking the U.S. government as to triaging the care that is needed by veterans, so that if there is a shortfall or if there are shortfalls, which we obviously have seen, and we know that you and me deal with veteran issues all the time, where some of our veterans, even out of Vietnam, are still not getting some of that coverage. Where is it where the VFW is involved to say that service-related medical care is going to have to be funded before voluntary, in this case, cosmetic surgery that the government is willing to pay $200,000 for? Is there something that the VFW can do to ensure that at least, is there a fight that's taking place I'm not aware of, or other veterans, where we could say, PTSD should be priority over these other type of operations that the government is willing to fund $200,000 per surgery on?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't know what the official stance, or if it's even been addressed by the National VFW. I know that, to me personally, and this is my personal opinion, not representative of the VFW, I find it a travesty of justice. You've got people that are sleeping on the street with severe addictions and PTSD issues that really do need help, and they're a low priority, where you're going to spend $200,000 on what really is an elective surgery. And it's, I mean, we're spending money like drunken sailors, no pun intended, in this nation. And it's been the past couple of administrations, but I don't know, the bean counters, I don't know where their minds are with this. And it seems to me like it's more of an agenda-driven thing than an actual statistical and numerical common sense approach to treatment. Elective surgery should be at the very back, and life and death surgeries and operations and assistance should be number one. And that's my opinion.
Let me ask you another question. I know I'm asking you some tough questions, Kevin, and I do know there's a fine line between an official position you could take and a personal position. But recently, you mentioned that there's kind of a disconnect with the current group of veterans and the older veterans, like the Vietnam vets. But recently, for the first time under the current administration, we've seen that the current administration has started to mirror some policies that other nations had used before, especially in the case of now we have a diversity czar that is even being given to various commands. I know that SOCOM recently had to welcome theirs in the Special Operation Command. So my question is that the SOCOM political officer in this case is Richard Torres, and Estrada, who was very infamous for faking a picture in order to try to compare the previous POTUS to a person that some of our grandparents fought against, in this case, Hitler from Nazi Germany. The U.S. Military apparently has no problem with this issue towards one political party's ideology rather than the Constitution when it comes to accepting these individuals and not pushing back on them. And frankly, even the both parties have approved the nomination of these individuals, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat in this case. What is the VFW's position, I guess I would ask, on these political officers in the military, given the fact that if they are going to be in, and we have a new generation of individuals that are learning a new perspective on issues, depending on what they want the warfighter to concentrate on now, how is it possible that we can have a new segment of our military coming out and being able to actually merge and become a much more powerful entity to add to those 2.6 million if they philosophically are not going to look at the world the same? I mean, one of the czars recently just said that, previous military was not the military that we should have had, talking about how they were racist, extremists, and even at times saying that those veterans that were served prior were better armed members of extremist militias. And these are words that have come from them, and these individuals are now assigned to re-educate, for the better term, our military. Does the VFW have a problem with this and messaging and being sent out there among the rank and file? And what would happen if this creates a schism between the veterans when they are now indoctrinated that the previous army was not the army that supported and defended the United States with many flaws, and that there needs to be a redesign of the military, I guess, in the terms. How is that going to affect when these young men and women come and join our rank and file and maybe say that the previous leadership is not the type of leadership that existed or should exist in the future of the VFW? Is there any crisis here that you see? Is there an issue that you think that needs to be addressed somehow, or is this way beyond the ability of the VFW to address?
Well, what I see, it's a very complex question, but I'll break it down. What I see is the greatest challenge facing the VFW right now is attrition. I think we're one of the larger posts in Illinois, but in the last 2 years, we've probably lost 350 plus members, and the bulk of those were WW2 and Korean War veterans. And we're not backfilling those with younger OEF and OAF veterans. It's a challenge to recruit those younger service members. Now, there has always been somewhat of friction at times between different eras. Like I know, and it was very disgraceful, but Vietnam veterans, when they initially came back, some of the VFW posts were very insulting to Vietnam veterans. And I've heard some horrendous stories where they were not welcome in the post. They were told they didn't fight in a real war. And, ironically, that most of the Vietnam veterans now are in senior positions of leadership in the VFW, or they are handing the reins down to younger guys in mentoring them. So that era is kind of transcended, but this also happened to the Korean War veterans. And one thing the Vietnam veterans did say in the VVA, their motto is that there shall never be another generation of soldiers or service members that were rejected and spit upon and just, completely left out and ignored and destroyed. And they've done a great job with that in terms of benefit preservation and whatnot, in making things happen for the future. Bringing in these kids in the future. This whole concept of indoctrination is very socialistic, and to me it's reminiscent of Marxism, and I find it horrendous, and it's something out of the Soviet Union era.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing this, it's permeating different levels of society. The VFW per se has not directly addressed it, but I would imagine at some point in time these things are going to have to be addressed. But I've also noticed that a lot of the kids, when I say kids, I mean the younger service members, they're very traditional. VFW members in general tend to be conservative and traditionalist. They're very loyal to their country and patriotic, and I've noticed that with the younger guys too. The younger guys are, they're a challenge because when you hook them in, if you overload them with responsibility, they'll run away from you. But if you don't give them some responsibility, they feel like they're not needed. So it's a fine balancing act, and I do think that attrition is a major concern, not just for the VFW, but for a lot of fraternal and social organizations. I don't know why, but I'm hearing this from different organizations that the youth of America, they don't have the desire to be part of organizations or to dedicate their time, and I don't really understand it, because you do get a lot out of giving, and it's going to be interesting to see how the future plays out.
Well, we'll see how it goes. All we could do is reach out to touch where we can. If we can raise the next generation, find in our own family, hopefully, it has effects. I know that the Vietnam veterans welcomed me with open arms when I came in, and they've been a blessing. There's a lot to be learned from them, and a refocus as to what dedication to the service to the nation means. It's just another repurposing after you leave the military. Kevin, much appreciated. I know we went a little bit over to time. I know it took us some time to get here, but before we leave, where can people go find out more about you, and especially about our particular Niles VFW chapter?
Well, they can go on Facebook, and that would be facebook.com nilesIL.VFW, or we have a very active Twitter, and that's twitter.com nilesVFW /VFW. We also have a web page, and we're really starting to evolve into the future with our social media campaign. We were a little bit behind on it, but it's starting to happen now.
Well, as you were talking, Kevin, we had a QR posted, and our listeners and our viewers that if you put your camera on that QR code, it will take you directly to the site for VFW Post 3579. Kevin, much appreciated. I know you've had a busy day today, and I'm glad we were able to have you on. Given anything that happens with our veterans and some of the changes taking place, we'll have you back on again, hopefully. With that said, I'm going to give you the last word for today specifically before we end the show.
Well, I just want to, make it known that we thank our Vietnam veterans, and I know it's very cliche to go up to a vet and thank them for their service, but it really means something with the Vietnam veterans, because a lot of these guys, just from experience, the president of the VBA told me when they had the parade in Chicago in 1986, he didn't attend it. He said he sat at home and he broke down on his couch, and just, it was like a wall broke. And then, he said after that, it was, that's when everybody started getting together and whatnot. And I do agree with that mission, that we can never leave our nation's veterans behind. A nation that does that is a nation that won't last. And I thank you, Sargis, for having me on.
No, thank you very much, Kevin. Well said. And with that said, I also will say to all our Vietnam veterans, welcome home, boys, and God bless you and keep you in His light and reach out and ask for help. It's okay. We're here to help you. With that said, there's new paradigms.